So thank you guys for having me in. My name is Amy Reeves. Been with Kentucky Retirement since 1992. God help me. I, like many of you, are actually I am eligible to retire. I was eligible June 1st. So it's pending. Haven't quite decided, but it's going to be within the next 6 months. So this stuff is very near and dear at this point to me. And I'm looking very forward to it. So hopefully I can share some information with you guys this morning. Make sure to get any questions you all have answered. So with that said, feel free at any point as we go through this morning to fire away any questions you guys may have. And I can go into more detail or try to explain things a little bit more. We're going to probably do just a little bit more than what you guys have in those books that I've provided. I would refer to those as the Reader's Digest version of the retirement information. It's probably, it hits all the high points, but there are some pieces and parts that some of you may have more interest in, and we do have a more in-depth booklet if you are so inclined, and that's available on our website. We actually refer to it as our pre-retirement education booklet, and it's about 82 pages where these guys are around 18. So we try to kind of give both varieties, and what I cover today will be a little bit more comprehensive than what you guys have in your books. But again, just feel free to ask questions at any point. Just a couple pieces about the systems as a whole. We have grown to be very complex. When the systems were first established, the KERS system was actually established in 1956, and then CERS was established in 1958. Everybody worked the same way. It was one group, it was all the same. And in fact, even when I came in 92, it was all just everything worked the same way. We now have 3 tiers. We have really 5 different retirement plans, because under both KERS and CERS, there is a hazardous plan as well as a non-hazardous plan. And then back in 2003, we also had a change with regard to the health benefits. So we have KERS, we have CERS, we have state police, and then we have hazardous and we have non-hazardous under the K and the C plans. Everybody in the state police is hazardous. And then Tier 1, which covers folks assuming that you started contributing before September of 08. Tier 2 covers folks between September 08 and December 13. And then Tier 3 picked up January 1 of 14. And then if anybody paid much attention to the gubernatorial race, Matt Bevin campaigned on basically a straight up 401k style plan, which could very well mean we're going to have a Tier 4 before too long as well. So things are in flux with the retirement system. The one thing that is, at least I hang my hat on this, if you will, is that by and large, particularly if you're in Tier 1 and 2, most aspects of your benefits are protected by state law. And even though there may be changes going forward, based again on how the law reads, those changes can't be made retroactively and change things for us. And I did say mainly for Tier 1 and 2, because I'll share with you guys that the Tier 3 plan design, while it's completely different than what you guys have, when that was created, the legislature gave themselves the ability to change any aspect of that plan design if they deemed, if they decided to, whether they deemed it necessary or not. And so for those folks, who came January 1, 14 and after, they could throw the baby out with the bathwater and start them all brand new. And not true for you guys, with the exception of those of you who did start after July of 03, the health benefit side of it, because the way they changed health benefits, when they did that legislatively, and again, it was effective with the date of the legislation, so July 103, they changed the structure, they changed how the benefit worked, and additionally, they stripped it out from under that contractual protection. So that's one aspect that even if you're a Tier 1 person, if you started after July of 03, those health benefits are not completely protected anymore. Where if you did start prior to that, the health benefit as well as how the pension works, all of that is protected. So things have gotten extremely complex for us. It's a lot more difficult to go out and talk to folks. The other point that I always like to make when I talk about this slide is that you guys are in CERS. That is the system which does not have the funding issues. So as far as the takeaway, that's a great thing for you guys. The basic reason that you all don't have the same funding issues as KERS and state police is simply because employers in CERS, which CERS is our largest system, employers have always paid what's known as the actuarial required contribution. The ARC is the abbreviation. And that has not happened in KERS and the state police plan because the employer portion of the funding comes from the budget from the Commonwealth, and the budget has set that funding at a lower rate than what our actuaries and our board passed, and that happened for 20 plus years. So after years and years and years of chronically shorting the funding coming into the system, it doesn't take an economist or even a mathematician to see that that's going to result in a shortfall, and that's exactly where we find ourselves. Again, takeaway for you guys is that's not been the case in CERS. While you're not ideally funded, you are way better funded than where we find ourselves in the other two plans. I do want to also point out here, if you'll notice, and I know it's kind of hard to see that slide, there's actually a pension fund and an insurance fund within each of the plans. So part of the employer money that comes, well, all of the employer money that comes in the door gets split between the two funds. So some of it's allocated to the pension, some of it's allocated to the insurance fund. And those funds, they basically act just like trust funds. Every month when we go to cut payroll checks for retirees, those are cut from the pension fund. Health benefits are paid from the insurance fund. And so that's just sort of, again, just kind of background how things are working. Now, with respect to you guys, I'm going to go ahead and fast forward here. You all pay 5% of your gross salary into your own individual accounts. And that 5% is actually fixed in state law as well. So that's another one of those things that's kind of set. And in order for that to be changed, at least the way the law reads and my understanding of it is, in order for them to charge you more, they would have to provide some type of benefit along with that, a quid pro quo, if you will. They can't say pay us more without offering some additional benefit. So that 5% has been 5% for a lot of years. Way back in the day, I think it was 4 and it graduated up to where it is today at 5. But there were incentives passed along the way when we saw those increases. But that's one of the big reasons why we sit at 5% and still sit there, because there's probably not going to be any incentives or any enhancements. So statutorily, they can't technically charge you guys more. But just kind of baseline understanding where the funding comes from. You guys pay your own accounts 5%. And that is fixed. You can't pay more into the retirement account. And you guys would not want to pay more into the retirement fund because we don't actually use your contributions, your balance, to determine your benefits. We use a formula. So anything additional, of course, you want to put that away in other retirement savings plans like deferred comp, 401ks, 457s, those things. But that employer money, again, coming in the door, the way this plan is set up, it's a defined benefit plan. We're a 401A plan. And in a defined benefit plan, the bottom line is that benefits are based on a formula. It's a life annuity once you qualify for it, so you're going to be paid for your entire lifetime, no matter how long you guys live. So generally, within about 2 to 3 years of somebody being retired, you will have been paid back all of your own contributions. So that 5% you guys are contributing, you get that back within a really short amount of time. Once you're retired, you're actually paid from that source of funds first. And then from that point, for the rest of your life, this is where the great benefits of the defined benefit plan kick in. You get that monthly check forever. And then you're pulling off those trust funds, just like everybody else. And that's how it's sustained. So that employer money does not go into your all's individual accounts. You all don't see an accounting of that employer portion in any way in your individual accounts. Unless you're a Tier 3 member, but none of you guys are. So a lot of people don't understand that. They very much confuse, why my employer's paying, in your all's case, 17.06%. Actually, this is old because July 1 we flipped to the new rates. that money all goes into those pension and insurance funds. Those don't, materialize in your all's accounts. And it's just the type of plan that this is. And a lot of people don't have a good understanding of how that works. So hopefully that helps explain a little bit of that. Generally the other takeaway that I like to do with this particular slide, besides the fact that you guys are in the plan that doesn't have the funding issue, is that there is reciprocity. So if you were to, say, leave your position here and you go become a state employee, your account will just continue to accumulate like it always has. You would be paying into a different system, KERS in that example, but as far as looking at your retirement eligibility and the calculation, we would basically look at both accounts as if it were one in making that determination. So that reciprocity exists if you were to switch around. Whoops, we timed out. Go back to here. Okay. So, two takeaways there. Reciprocity, plus you guys are in the system that is not, terribly funded. And the papers get that terribly wrong most of the time. And they just throw it out there that, Kentucky Retirement Systems is the worst funded plan in the country. It is not CERS, it is literally KERS. So, it's just something, so hopefully that gives you guys a little bit of peace of mind with regard to that and how that works. And then the third source of funding is investment income. So again, this kind of goes along with, if they're going to short the funding coming in the door, that's going to short the ability for us to make money on those investments. It's also had a big bearing on the risk tolerance that KERS can handle at this point because those funding levels are so low. So CERS is generally seeing a better return simply because they've got a little bit more flexibility with regard to those investments, where KERS is so critical that they have to be so very cautious. So there's a whole lot going on with that right now. Any questions on any of that? Anybody?
I do have a question. So if you're in CERS now and say you went to a different job where you're paying into KERS, I know you said that the benefit would be the same as with CERS, but is the risk of you having that retirement money, because you will then be in KERS, is that a risk, or are you good?
Well, I go back to the inviolable contract protections that we have. I mean, my 27 years are all in KERS. So, the Commonwealth, the way that the statute, is worded is our benefits are protected, can't be reduced or impaired. And ultimately, the Commonwealth would be on the hook for the payments if the retirement system were to be bankrupted. Now, that would be a horrible worst-case scenario. But the bottom line is the benefits are guaranteed by the Commonwealth, not just by the retirement system. So, I sure hope so. Now, that's not something anybody wants to see tested in court. We don't certainly want to get to that point with the funding in KERS. Now, they've made some strides. They're funding at the full rates right now. So if you'll notice, they're paying the full ARC and have done so for the last 2 years. They're also, this last session, created some additional funding that they're just going to put back into the system. Now, that's going to have to continue for some time to shore that back up. But it is, basically it finally came to critical mass, and they are finally doing something about that. But again, at the end of the day, the benefits are ultimately guaranteed by the Commonwealth. So I think even if, at least that's, for my 27 years worth, I sure hope that those, so it doesn't come to that. So no, I would not say, and the reality is that, if it was a small portion of your service, you're not talking a great amount of money. Anyway, not that that would matter. If it's belly up, it's belly up. But I don't see them letting it get to that point. That would be a terrible catastrophe. There would be lawsuits galore. So, and the Commonwealth would just simply have to levy a whole bunch of taxes, to get the money back in, and that's not something they have done. But a Commonwealth, and we've seen some cities across the country who have filed for bankruptcy. A Commonwealth can't do that because they can always levy taxes to generate that income. So, that would, again, obviously worst case scenarios. They're trying to take steps now to correct it, but 25 plus years to dig the hole, it's going to take a lot of time, to dig back out. So, I'm banking on my check being in my bank account every month. So, I don't know how to go forward any other way. That being said, there is a teacher's retirement that's independent from us, legislators and judicial as well. So there are actually 6 systems that are state administered in Kentucky, and that reciprocity extends across all 6. So, maybe teaching, although they're having some funding issues over there too. So, it is what it is. But yes, you do have that benefit. And I see people all the time, they have like 5 accounts. They'll have hazardous and non-hazardous, and they'll have state time and county time, and then they'll have a couple years of teaching to boot. And basically they're gonna get a little check from each little, piece of the pie, and, but it all adds up, of course, so, yeah. Okay, you're all specific accounts with us. Everybody has 2 sets of numbers we've assigned. I know, it's a lot, considering all the other stuff we have to keep up with this, passwords and everything else. But you guys do have both a PIN, which is a 4-digit number, and then also a member ID, which probably for you guys is a 6-digit number. The member ID is your account number. That would be a system-generated number. Both of these are actually system-generated numbers. You would have never made the number up yourself. That number will live with you from now until the end of your time. The PIN can be reassigned, reissued. Again, it's one that the system generates. You don't get to set it. But if you've lost a PIN, misplaced a PIN, never got a PIN, you can call us. We will push a button that tells our system to generate a new PIN. We do not have access to those numbers. No one in our office has access to those PIN numbers. Those are very protected. They're very secure. They serve as basically a second source of identifying information for you guys. And so the system generates it. All our folks do when you call in is they validate it. So they pop your PIN into a little box and then hit validate, and it tells them if it's a good number or not. If it's a good number, they can talk to you about your account. If it's not a good number, they're going to have to issue you a new one. Then that has to mail, and you'll get it within a few days in the mail. So the PIN can be reissued. The member ID, you guys can find member IDs online on your own online accounts. You can also, that is a number we can provide by phone, but you would need to be able to give us your social and your PIN in order for us to provide that number to you. But the member ID is not quite as secure. We started using member IDs several years ago in place of socials where we could. We still have to get socials on occasion for things, but we tried to stop using socials just as a security process at that point. So everybody's got those 2 sets of numbers. My best advice would be get a hold of them. If you've not started a retirement file or folder, maybe do that and just shove it in a drawer or a file cabinet somewhere, and that way you always have access to those numbers. Everybody should have done a beneficiary designation with us. Guys, I'll tell you that about half the people that I sit down with and when we log into their accounts, those beneficiaries are not up to date. And so you guys, it looks like, most of your tier 1 and even some of your tier 2s, you're probably vested already, meaning you've already done 5 years. Beneficiaries are eligible for death benefits if something happened to you guys while you're working. So you want to make sure that you have your beneficiaries up to date so the appropriate folks would be eligible for those benefits if something did happen to you. Now, it's a little different as far as the beneficiary designations. It's different while you're working versus when you're retired. You're going to be a little more restricted when you retire as far as who you can designate. But while you're working, you can designate a principal beneficiary, and you can also designate a contingent beneficiary. And your options would be a person or persons. You can name multiple people to either of those designations. You can also designate a trust or an estate, or your estate. So those are your options as far as the beneficiary designations. And if you need to change the designations, it's a matter of doing a new form, the Form 2035. That form does require a witness signature, so it's not an e-form that you can do electronically. You got to do it old school, print it out, and get both the signatures, and you can fax it or mail it back in to change those beneficiaries if you need to do that. The way it would work, a principal beneficiary would receive death benefits if something happened to you guys. Those benefits, there are 3 or 4. If you just have one person, I'll use myself as an example. My husband is my principal beneficiary. So if something were to happen to me, he would be given a choice of a 5-year monthly payment option, a 10-year monthly payment option, a lump sum refund, or a lifetime payment option, a monthly lifetime payment option. And the way that would be calculated would be based on my account at the time of my death. So those numbers, those benefit amounts actually get determined based on your account at the time of your passing. Now, my mother is my contingent. I don't have kids. So if something were to happen to both me and my husband simultaneously, then those benefits would be made available to my mom. So the contingent only that kicks in if something happens both to the member and the principal, okay? So you have, the different choices. Now, again, when you guys go to retire, there's not a contingent basically, and you're also locked in. You can't change the designation, and we'll talk about that a little bit more as we get to those benefit options. Oh, here are the benefits. So as far, I mentioned the online account just a second ago. You guys can go online. We have what we refer to as the Member Self-Service website. We call it MSS for short. This provides all of your account information. It's going to show you your beneficiaries. It's going to show you your service credit. It's going to even provide a detailed history of that service credit because you can look at that on a yearly breakdown. If you've purchased time back, that's going to be detailed as well. So all of that information is available online to you guys now. I love it. The things that I love about it the most, that about two-thirds or the third one from the bottom there, the benefit estimate. That's the retirement calculator. And I use that bad boy all the time now. I've used it so often, I could run about 10 different retirement dates in a matter of 5 minutes. So it's super quick and easy to use, and it will literally generate your numbers and show you your different options. And it's quick and it's easy, and if you're having a bad day, sometimes it's a good place to go. Light at the end of the tunnel. There's also a service purchase estimate.
Working here, okay.
I'm sorry. Yeah. There's also a service purchase estimate, and so I mentioned if you had purchased service back, I bought some time back. And this calculator will actually determine the cost if you were eligible to purchase time. And so what you can do with these tools yourself, you can go online, you can say, okay, maybe you have 4 years, 5 years you could buy back. You could go online and use the service purchase calculator to see what that's going to cost. And the bad news is it's going to be really expensive. But then you can turn around and go to the benefit calculator and apply that service purchase, and it will redo your numbers for most of you and show you that you can retire 4 or 5 years earlier should you make that purchase. So it's kind of nice. You can do all the same things that a counselor would do for you at our office. You all have those resources at your fingertips now. The question I probably get asked most about this is how accurate is it? Guys, it's real time. I mean, we're posted. Usually we're about a month or 2 behind real time as far as posting date, but your service and your salary, all of that information is filtered into these calculators. So it is real time. There are, the benefit calculator does allow you to make assumptions. You can actually tell it to assume raises every year. You can actually overwrite the salary average number and plug in your own number. So it is only as accurate as the data you're putting in, but if you don't manipulate the information, it's going to get you completely in the ballpark based on whatever retirement date you're looking at. The other thing people tell me a lot is, well, I'm afraid I'm going to mess something up. And I mean, quite frankly, you can't mess anything up. I mean, if you're going in and overriding a number, making it a bigger number, you're doing that. So, you're not going to mess anything up. So don't be afraid to get in there and play around with those calculators. They will automatically pull up when you are first eligible to retire and when you are first eligible to retire without a penalty. So it's interesting, and again, you can make different assumptions on there, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a sec.
Amy, are you going to talk about the service purchase?
Yes.
A little bit later?
Yes, we're going to get to that in just a sec. I mentioned, I'm sorry.
I have a quick question.
Sure.
Yes, I've been here for 15 years, but I've never been into my retirement side, Kentucky.gov.
You
What
at
will I-
90%.
What will I need to get in there? My PIN number?
Yes, registration for the online is 3 steps. Step 1 is social, date of birth. Step 2, PIN number, email address. Step 3, you make up a user ID and a password, and then you use that for future logins. So the PIN is critical for that step. And then you have access to everything. Yep. So again, that's why PIN to me is a lot more critical of a number than the member ID. You can actually, once you get in online, you can see your member ID in there. But the PIN, as long as you have that PIN, you can always go in and reset you can just re-register, you can reset the ID and password that you set up during the registration process. So, yes.
Amy, I was just wondering, like we have, like, be like in the next one, but we have like the new employees, do they just generate and send out a new PIN to them?
The newer folks get a PIN with their new member packet, so yes. Anyone else, the last time we did a mailing in mass was May of 2014. That's actually the only time we've sent them out to everybody. And so we sent letters out at that point along with a little cheat sheet that talked about, how to use the benefit estimate, the calculators. And so that's been the only time. So unless you've requested the number specifically since then, you've not received anything with that PIN on it. Now, annual statements before 2012, so 2011 and probably back to maybe 06, maybe not even that far, had the PINs on them. So if you've been one of those people who do save everything from the retirement system, again, you're in like the 1% minority, you probably have your PIN on an old annual statement. But we stopped sending those when we went online. And so those ones that are online now don't have the PINs listed on them. Again, it's just a security issue that they didn't want to put all that information on one document. So, okay. Basically, guys, you have 3 options with regard to your accounts should you terminate your employment. You can retire if eligible, which is probably the goal for most of us. That would be my plan. You can also just pretty much park your account with us, leave it, and then you can come back to it at a later date and either, start your benefits at that point, assuming you're old enough and eligible. Maybe you end up working for another participating employer and you start adding back to it. So if you should leave, there is no timeline as far as making a decision with that account. You don't have to withdraw it within a specified amount of time. You don't have to do anything with it. You can just literally let it sit. Again, those of you who have been in for say 10, 15 years, you've not only earned that pension benefit, you've potentially earned that health insurance benefit as well, which would kick in once you're you're eligible for retirement. So you need to be cognizant if you leave, potentially what benefits you would be giving up if you did a refund of your account balance, which is option number 3. Refunds for you guys, tiers 1 and 2, would be comprised strictly of your member contributions, the 5%, and those contributions have earned a little bit of interest, but again, we don't use your balance to determine your benefits, so it's just a very modest amount of interest. So a refund would just be your specific balance, and that can be rolled into another qualified plan, pre-tax plan, or you could choose to have that paid directly to you. Either way, it's still considered a refund or a withdrawal of the account balance. Now, the back in when Tier 3 was created, part of the Senate bill that created Tier 3 included a change to refunds. Actually, when somebody pays back a refund. So and we're going to talk about service purchases, but there are a host of service purchases. One of those is to repay a refund. The law changed effective January 1/14, and while a person is still eligible to repay a refund, the law does not allow them to get back their original hire date if they do that. So you guys all have something called a participation date with us, and that's basically the date you first contributed. Think of it as your membership date. If you refund, you lose that date. So if you were to come back in, let's say you're now with a new employer and you're paying back in, you wanted to repay it, you're going to be in Tier 3 at this point. You won't be able to get back to Tier 1 or 2. Now you can reinstate the service credit, get the service credit back, but you can't get back the old tier, which means you can't get back to the old benefits. So there's a much larger consequence now for folks who take a refund of their balance, because if they, and I was one of those people, I left after 7 years a long time ago. And I thought I was being smart, and I rolled my money into 401k thinking, well, I can earn more interest there. And then 3 years pretty much to the day, I was back in my same job and then chose to repay those 7 years. Unfortunately, my timing was terrible because when I moved it to the 401, the market tanked. It was in 2000, market tanked, and I lost most of the value, so I ended up having to shell out of pocket to pay those 7 years back. But I did that before the law changed, so that got me back to my 1992 date. And again, that wouldn't happen anymore based on that law change in 2014. So bigger deal to taking money out. So I always caution people, understand what those future benefits would be, if you leave it, because you can always come back to it when you're old enough and qualify for retirement based on your age. This is the formula we use to determine the benefits. And we're going to talk about each of these three pieces. Final compensation is simply a salary average. Statutorily, that's the name, but I generally use salary average instead of final compensation. Benefit factor is going to differ depending on when you started and whether you're a tier 1 or 2, and we'll talk about that and break that down. And then years of service. Years of service, while it looks pretty cut and dry, there's actually 3 different types of service that can make up your total years, and so we'll look at those. Current service is what you guys earn each month while you work. Member service, we could call it member service, current service, 12 months a year. So statute says you have to be doing at least 100 hours a month to be considered full-time. I'm assuming you guys all do at least 100 hours a month, probably way more, but that's current service. So that piece is pretty cut and dry, 12 months a year. There's also purchase service. This gets a little trickier. In the state of Kentucky, there are over 30 types of service purchases that one may buy back. Now, you do have to be eligible for the specific type, but there are lots, and those are detailed in those pamphlets. I think probably pages 12 and 13 details most of those purchase types. Statute says that whatever type of service you're buying back had to be full-time, and that's based on the Kentucky definition, which again is 100 hours a month. You have to be able to provide documentation of that service. And so each type is going to have a corresponding form that, I'll use when I left 7 years, or back after 7 years, I moved to Massachusetts, and I actually worked for the teacher's retirement in Massachusetts. And like I said, pretty much 3 years to the day, I was back at my job at Kentucky Retirement. So I bought those years in Massachusetts as out-of-state service. So there's a specific form that I had to send to Massachusetts to have that out-of-state employment documented. Same thing is true for federal service, military service. Depending on the type of service, there's a specific form that goes along with that. Those forms are all available on our website. And you'd have to just have the appropriate documentation for whatever you're trying to buy back. And that's up to you guys to get that documentation. And that sometimes is the hardest part, because not all agencies keep really good records. So sometimes, tracking down records to get enough documentation where we're able to say, sure, Shirley, you can buy that service credit, that gets tricky sometimes. Basically, we have to know that if the employer can document that it was full-time service and can provide the dates of employment, generally that's enough. In certain cases, though, they're like the out-of-state employment, I also had to show proof that I didn't have service credit for that out-of-state service still in Massachusetts. In other words, I had to take a refund of that Massachusetts account before Kentucky would allow me to buy it. So that form was like a 2-part form. So there's documentation involved. Law change in 2004 did 2 things to service purchased credit. Number 1, it said that while you can buy service back, it won't count toward health insurance benefits. So you can buy service to generate more years for the pension benefit, the money, but you can't buy years to count toward your health insurance benefit unless it's a refund buyback or something called omitted, okay? So those 2 will still count toward health insurance benefits. The other thing the law did in 2004 is it said that if your participation date was August 04 and after, the purchase of that additional service credit, again, while it will count in the calculation of your benefit, it will get you more money, it cannot be used to get you out the door sooner. It can't be used for retirement eligibility. So that means that there's really 2 reasons why you would buy service back. If you started before August of '04, you can purchase years back to get yourself to retirement eligibility sooner, and that's what I've done. I bought 3 years out of state, and I bought 4 years of something called non-qualified airtime service. So I worked 20 for my health insurance benefit, and then I bought 7, and so collectively now have the 27, which is, I'm a tier 1 person, which means I can go ahead and go at any point now without penalty, okay? So reason number 1 that you spend a boatload of money to buy years back is because it gets you out the door sooner. Reason number 2 would simply be, I mean, if you will, it's an investment. More years of service into that formula is going to result in a higher monthly check. So it's straight up an investment. You're going to get that check for your lifetime. The deal is, how long does it take you to recover that investment, just like with any investment. And again, this is something that you can go online and do with those calculators. And so what you want to look at is, A, how much does it cost me to buy the years back? And then B, what does it do to that benefit? How much does it increase my monthly retirement check? And you can take that increase into your cost, and that's going to give you a baseline recovery. So do you get your money back within 5 years? Do you get your money back within 10 years? How long is it going to take you in your specific scenario to recover that investment, and is it a good idea for you? We cannot tell you yes or no, this is a good idea. We do not have financial planners on staff. We will not take on that liability. We will simply show you the numbers. Of course, you guys can do that yourselves as well. This is what it would cost you. This is what your benefits would look like, if you bought it versus if you didn't buy it. So, then you can take that to a financial planner and make that determination. So that's kind of what you're looking at. Now me, I bought time specifically to be able to retire early. So I'm not doing the same kind of analysis. I'm doing, basically I'm going to get to that check 4 years sooner, or in my case 7 years sooner than I would have. So for me, I'm going to basically recover immediately just because I wouldn't otherwise have been able to get to that check. So it's a different, kind of analysis depending on what you're using it for. So, to each his own. It is rather expensive. In fact, the cost amounts have gone up substantially. Last major change was back in 2008. And all the purchase types are actuarially determined based on your current data. So it's July 5th, what is today? July 6th. If you guys called the retirement office today or you went online to use the calculator, it's going to look at all your data based on the month of July. So it's going to look at how old you are. It's going to look at the service credit you already have on file. It's actually going to look at your participation date. Because remember what we just talked about? If you started before August of '04, if you purchase years, you can use those years to count toward your eligibility, get you out the door sooner. And because of that, you actually pay a higher premium for it. So it costs you more if it counts toward your retirement eligibility. All those things are factored in to come up with this just crazy cost. But again, it just kind of depends on what your plans are. I have some people who will look at it and be like, oh, that's not so bad. And some people who are like, oh, no way, I'll just work my years. So kind of depends on where you are. My husband and I put together some plans a while back. We wanted to have this sort of second career and be able to go do some things. So we positioned ourselves to pay, as best we could, pay our debt down, and then we bought those years of service just to allow us to go ahead and go. And we're actually planning on, and this is being recorded, so I'm now preserving this January 1. And, our plan is to take off it and go and do some other things. And, and while we by no way will be rich, our point was we want to go do these things while we're still able to do these things. So again, it just kind of depends on what your future plans are. But for me, it was worth it to pay for the time. There are a few purchases which don't require a vesting period. I mentioned the refunds earlier. Most purchases require that you have 5 years in. Here are most of the normal vested types. Past service, simply that service that you may have worked somewhere before they were in the retirement system. And so now that they're in, that's eligible. I mentioned military already, National Guard Reserve, State University, out of state, temporary, seasonal, interim. I mean, there are over 30 types. Here's the way I kind of boil it down. If you've ever worked in the public sector, and you didn't get credit for it with the retirement system, you can probably buy the time and get the credit. So that being said, you can't buy work from Kroger, you can't buy work from Macy's, it has to be public sector work. But if you didn't get credit for it, if you were in a position which didn't allow you to pay into the retirement plan, likelihood that you can buy it. And again, it would be based on that actuarial cost. Now, the final purchase type is called non-qualified service. The nickname is airtime, ghost years. So depending on where you are in the state, you hear people call it all kinds of crazy things. Some people just say, I want to purchase that 5 years. And that's exactly what this allows one to do. If they meet the requirements, you can purchase 5 additional years of service credit. These years aren't tied to other employment. They're not tied to any other period of actual time. It's literally just service credit that you buy to add to what you've already worked. The requirements are these. Number 1, you can't buy this until you have 15 years in. So it's a different vesting requirement before you can buy. So you gotta have 180 months of other service. Let's go to that bottom bullet. This is gonna get some of you guys. The other piece of this says that in order for you to qualify to buy it when you have your 15 years, you also have to have service credit on record prior to August of '02. Now, I said it specifically the way I said it instead of participating because the law actually allows for another period of purchase service to stand as service before August of '02. So let me give you an example. I had a girl in Lexington last week. She had a period of seasonal service that was for a time period prior to August of '02. She didn't start till like January of '03. So she didn't meet that requirement based on her actual work service. But if she came in and bought her seasonal time, which was before August of '02, that would then establish time to meet that requirement. So other purchase service can qualify you for that bottom requirement, okay? It doesn't have to be service you worked and paid in for. And then third is that when you do go to apply for your benefits, you have to have 20 other years. Those 20 other years can be made up of purchased, worked, or sick leave. So there's all the variety, but you gotta have 20 other years. So it takes 20 years to validate that purchase. If you don't have it, we would refund back the purchase price. We have one lady on account that has 19 years of service. She's inactive, meaning she's no longer contributing. She bought 5 years of airtime. So her airtime is not validated yet. If she were to come in and apply for her retirement benefits or apply for a refund, we'd have to give her back the purchase price and then set her up based on those 19 years because she didn't have that 20th year to validate it. So, I mean, she always has the ability to come back to work and gain that final year, so it's all just sitting there right now. I just can't fathom spending that kind of money and then not somehow gutting it out and seeing it through. But again, the things happen, so, but that's airtime, okay? So if you are somebody who has time to buy, paying for it, again, a little trickier. We are subject to several Internal Revenue Code regulations, as one might imagine, with the public defined pension system. This thing called Internal Revenue Code 415C regulates how much money you guys can spend by way of a lump sum payment. And by and large, lump sums are not going to be a viable option for most of you. 415C puts such a restrictive amount on us that usually our costs are way higher than what the IRS says we can write a check for. Airtime specifically has to be paid for with pre-tax money because of some provisions around it. So lump sum is never eligible if you're buying airtime back, okay? You have to pay for it with pre-tax money. The way you would pay for a purchase with pre-tax money are the bottom two options. The middle option, installment purchase of service agreement, this is a payroll deduction method. And so, you know, if your cost is say 50 grand, you can have that payroll deducted up to a period of 5 years. 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 years. And that would be, you can do that on a pre-tax basis. And that's how I pay for my airtime. I bought 4 years back over a 5-year contract period, and it was about a third of my check for those 5 years. So, I mean, I paid dearly for it. But again, you know, I'm at that point where, you know, I'm eligible to go. The third option is to roll money from another qualified plan. There's no consequence to that. Now, generally, there's a very small managerial fee or management fee that the plan holder will charge you to move the money, but there's no tax consequence. So as an example, the state deferred comp, they charge a very nominal amount just to move the money, but there's no tax consequence. You can also do a combination. So again, let's go with assuming a cost was 50 grand. You could roll 25 from your 401k or your 457 over, and then you could payroll deduct the remaining 25 or any combination. Okay, so you do have those options. And I mentioned 50 grand. A lot of you, I mean, quite frankly, you may be looking at anywhere in the neighborhood of 70, 80 to purchase up to 5 years back. It is really, really expensive to do this. I kind of liken it to buying years of your life. What's a year of your life worth? At least that's the way I was able to stomach it and do that. So, any questions on that? Okay, all right. The reason that the airtime is not eligible is because it doesn't qualify as a grandfathered purchase type in the IRS eyes. Lump sums are going to be available to some of you, but two things have to happen. You yourself had to participate before July of '99, and whatever you're purchasing back had to be available August 5, '97. Airtime was not created until 1998. So it can't qualify in any way as a grandfathered service type, so it's got to be paid for with pre-tax money. So there is rhyme and reason sometimes behind these crazy things that I have to tell people, but that's basically why. Okay guys, when can you retire? Who's tier 1? Okay, who's tier 2? Let's go that way. That's fewer of you guys. Okay, so tier 1s, we're gonna hit you guys first. 2 ways to retire: unreduced benefits. Think of it the same way as when you qualify for your full Social Security benefit versus reduced benefits. So that would be Social Security at 62 when it's reduced. So for us, for the CERS, tier 1s, age 65 or 27 years of service credit. If you have the years of service, it doesn't matter how old you are. So age is not a factor if you have the years. That qualifies you for an unreduced benefit. You can go early with a reduced benefit, in other words, a penalty, at age 55 or with 25 years of service. If you have the years, it doesn't matter how old you are. So it's either or, whichever comes first for you guys. Okay? Everybody got that? Tier 2s, you guys qualify also at 65 for an unreduced benefit. But to qualify prior to 65, you have to meet something called Rule of 87. Rule of 87 says you've got to be 57 years old, so there is a minimum age requirement. And then it also says that your age plus your years of service have to equal 87. So if you follow that math, if you are 57 years old, that means you would need at least 30 years of service to meet Rule of 87 in order to go ahead and qualify to retire without a penalty. Okay, so it's again, whichever comes first for the tier 2 person, Rule of 87 or age 65. Tier 2 folks can retire early with a reduction at age 60 with a minimum of 10 years of service. Okay? Makes sense to everybody? May not make sense, but understand, I got that. Now, if we break the formula back down, let's do a real quick example. Let's say that you have your 27 years. And let's say, yep.
Can you go and explain the sick leave?
Yes, I'm so sorry. Go back to that. Let's go to your books instead of me ruffling to find. If you guys could go, somebody tell me, you've got sick leave open right there. Okay, page 11, I apologize. You guys do the standard sick leave plan, correct, up to 6 months? I'm so sorry, guys, I skipped right over that. There's so much. My brain just, don't know how I missed that. The slide is hidden. That's how I missed it. Okay, sick leave service. You guys participate, or the agency, I should say, has opted in to participate in what's called the standard sick leave plan. Now, in the CERS population, it's optional for employers to do this. They basically have to sign an order to do it. And there is a liability because they get billed for the cost of this service, the same way you guys would pay for a service credit you were buying back. So it's rather expensive. It's a super benefit because if we are fortunate enough to have an unused balance of sick leave when we go to terminate and retire, that sick leave balance converts to additional service credit, okay? Up to 6 months for you guys. So the charts in the books show the conversion. The way it works is that 11 days is sick leave. Do you guys work 7.5 or 8 hours a day? Okay, so find the 7.5 chart, 82.5 hours would get you 1 additional month of service credit. Now from 1 month to 2 months, 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, it's an additional 21 days. And the chart shows that in hours. So when you get to 240, now I've got 2 months worth of service, and so on and so forth up to the 6 months. So tier ones, sick leave credit counts toward your eligibility and toward your health insurance. So let me give you an example there. You have 26.5 years of service. You have 6 months worth of sick leave. Boom, you've got your 27. You can go ahead and retire 6 months early. Let's do another example. Let's say you're 55, so you meet the age requirement. Let's say you have 19.5 years. You got 6 months worth of sick leave. That gives you the 20 you need for full health insurance. So sick leave for tier ones count toward the retirement eligibility and the health insurance benefits, okay? Tier twos, it just counts on your service. So it's gonna get you more money the same way as if you purchased 6 months. So it's still gonna get you more money on the retirement check. But tier twos, you can't use it to retire early and it doesn't get used toward your health insurance benefits, okay? Yeah.
I started after the health benefit changed when I'm in tier one. So has there been a change, or is there just something saying that they can change it if they decide they want to?
For you, the sick leave would count toward your benefits, but the way the benefit works, it's instead of a certain percentage being paid, a certain dollar amount is paid, and that dollar amount is determined based on the years of credit. So in your situation, 6 more months may get you a little bit more dollars, a few more dollars paid toward the health benefit, okay? Where that wouldn't count toward a tier 2 person. I know that gets.
Well, and then I also worked at the senior center before I came here.
Mhm.
They did not pay into retirement. Is
Mhm.
that something that I could look at buying?
It would potentially be past services, the senior center part of the system now,
It is not.
then no, it would probably not be eligible. Yeah. Anybody else? So sick leave is wonderful if we're lucky enough to have that balance on the books when we go, because even no matter what tier you're in, it's gonna help your benefit a little bit. Obviously, it helps the tier ones a little bit more, assuming they're using it to get out the door sooner. But the same can be said for the service purchase rules too. So they have tweaked things slightly. And that's why I said earlier, to have the 20 to validate the airtime, sick leave counts toward that 20 to validate airtime as well. Okay? Yeah.
Okay, so I just have a question. Based on the previous comment, Sarah's a tier one, I'm a tier one. And I could use my sick leave to retire 6 months early.
Yes.
I have 26.5 years.
Yes.
And I actually have 23 years, so I have my full health benefit after 20 years, right?
Assuming you started before July of '03, yes.
So I feel like that differs from what you just told Sarah,
Yeah, her health benefit's different than yours
because she started
after July of '03, but she's still tier one, because tier one was good through 2008. Yeah. I know, it's a lot to keep up with, so guys, I mean, and that's just like, keep your head in the game for what applies to you. Try to, earmuffs for everything that doesn't. So I know it's extremely complex. That's why at the end of the day, my head always is about to explode. So I think that tells me it's time for me to do my paperwork. Okay, so salary average, guys. This is another piece of the pie. We got years of service, which we already, as you all can tell, it's a little more complex than just face value there. Salary average, also a little more complex than face value. It's going to work different if you're a tier one versus a tier two. Tier ones, highest 5 years wherever those have occurred. They do not have to be continuous or consecutive. Partial years can count. Here is an example on the left for a Tier 1 non-hazardous. This is an example of someone who would retire out August 1st. So often what we find if somebody retires early into a fiscal year is they can achieve an increase in their salary average calculation by working a month or two into that new fiscal year. Because what they've done is that 1 or 2 months have replaced a lower year from 6 years or however far back in the past. Now, not always true. Again, myself, we've not had increases in state government. So when I look at my salary average, they're pretty much the same for all my last 5 years. But if you've had even subtle increases in salary average, August, September is probably going to be a good time for you to just have as a comparison point against any other potential retirement dates that you may be looking at. So again, I actually hit my 27 in June, but, and I know I told you I haven't had any salary increases, but I get paid out for comp time. And so for me to cross the fiscal year and then factoring my comp payout into the salary average, I saw a huge benefit in doing that. So while I was eligible June 1, it was significant enough of an increase for me to wait into the new fiscal year for my salary average calculation, okay? So especially those of you who, you're timing out, you're eligible, say May, June, look at August just to see if it's significantly more and perhaps, you wait, because again, it's a lifetime benefit. Mine was $120 for at least 2 more months. It was huge. Now, between August and January, mine goes up $23. So for 5 more months of work, I'm not seeing a whole lot of an increase at this point. That's because my salary average isn't fluctuating. So those months aren't worth a whole lot to me at that point. It's just a matter of I'm still trying to save and bank on my salary. So again, it's just going to depend on your specific situation. But you guys want to, when you get to that point, you do want to keep in mind to compare different dates. It is a defined formula. There's not a lot we can do to tweak it. But sometimes you can time that retirement date to maximize that salary average calculation so you are getting bang for your buck, if you will. Okay? So that's Tier 1s. Tier 2s.
Can you go over the whole example on the calculations?
For the formula?
Yeah.
I'm gonna get that right there in just a couple slides. Tier 2s, you guys, it's a little more strict. It's the last 5 full fiscal. And those do have to be consecutive. So it's not your highest 5, it is your last 5 full. So it's always going to be based on 60 months. So all that I just said about timing the retirement for the Tier 1 people, that's not going to be applicable for the Tier 2s. Now you still, have to have your certain years of service and qualify for the eligibility, but we're always going to use the prior 5 fiscal years. Okay, so it's a little more cut and dried for you guys. Last piece is the benefit factor. Tier 1s. If you started before August of 2004, you guys have a 2.2% factor. If you started after August of 2004, it's a set 2%. Tier 2s, the legislature kind of messed with you guys here. They set up a tiered structure. The more years of service you have, the higher your percentage, your factor is. So at 1.75, it's going to require 26 years and a month to 30 years. And then anything above 30, you would get at a 2% payback. So let me do some math for you there. Somebody who's in Tier 1, say, who has 27 years multiplied by 2% is 54% of your salary average. If you were at the 2.2 factor, that's 59.4% of your salary average. So this is how, again, just putting the formula together, years of service multiplied by this percentage, that gives us the percent of our salary average that the benefit's going to be based upon. So you do that same math, somebody 27 years under Tier 2, it's multiplied by 1.75%. So you're not getting as much of your salary average. So this is one of those areas where they hit the Tier 2 folks pretty hard, I think. Early factor, and then we'll look at the formula. 6.5% every year you choose to retire early, assuming you still have to meet the early retirement guidelines, whether you're Tier 1 or 2. So let's say I'm Tier 1. I'm age 55. I have 25 years of service. We're gonna look at the age away from 65, which is 10 in that case, and then the years away from 27, which is 2 in that case, and it's the lesser of those. So if I chose to retire in this scenario, I would have a 13% reduction. In other words, I would receive 87% of my benefit. Let's say that I'm tier 2 and I'm 60 years old and I have the minimum 10 years that I need. Then we would look at how far I am from 65, which is 5, and then how far I would be from the rule of 87. 60 plus 10 is 70, so I'm 17 years from 87. That means I get penalized by being 5 years away. 67.5% is what I get. It's a 32.5% hit, which is pretty substantial. So here's the formula. This is a tier 2 based on 30 years. Salary average of $42,100. So again, we multiply those 3 pieces together and that gets us the annual benefit. And you guys all have an example of this in your books too. That's how we get to the base pension. Those 3 things multiplied together. Again, if it was early, we'd actually have a 4th step here and we'd have to apply that penalty, okay? So that would reduce that annual pension down a little bit. When you guys retire, we are always going to start with this. And if you took that 22,102.50 in this guy's case and divided it by 12, we get something called our basic payment option. When you guys go to retire, you are going to choose a payment option. The basic payment option provides you the highest check every month for your lifetime, but there is no survivor benefit built into the basic option. So you're getting the most for your years, but upon your death, there is no survivor benefit paid out, okay? The other thing to know, so 2 things you guys do when you go through the retirement process. I'm gonna go back to this slide for a sec. Number 1, you redesignate your beneficiary on your retirement paperwork. At the time of retirement, you are eligible to only designate one person, a trust, or your estate, okay? You can't designate multiple people anymore, and you do not have a contingent. And once you're retired, day 1 of retirement rolls around, you cannot change that designation. So if that person passes before you, you don't get to rename. If it's a spouse and you divorce, you do not get to rename. You're gonna just continue getting your check based on the option that you chose, okay? So basic does not provide a survivor benefit. You have a group known as Life with 10, 15, and 20 years certain, which are going to guarantee your payment is made, or excuse me, the payment is made at least that amount of time, but it's lifetime for you, the member. So the way that, say, Life with 20 would work, and we're going to kill John and Jane Doe off here. We're not going to kill any of us off. So we're going to just play with John and Jane here. Jane is John Doe's wife, and they are close to the same age. That's an important consideration too, because if you name someone who's a lot younger than you, maybe you do decide to name a child, you will see your survivorship options will be impacted. And I'll bear with me for one moment, I'll explain that. But with the Life with 10, 15, and 20, unlike the basic, which, you know, John kicks the bucket 5 years into it, boom, that's it. These say, well, we guarantee that John or Jane will get that money for 10, 15, or 20. So Life with 20, let's say John took Life with 20, he's taking a reduced amount, so he's dropping down to $13.78 a month from the $14.52. And this is gonna look a little different for every one of you guys when you look at your numbers. That's why it's important to get in there and look at your own accounts and your own dollar amounts. But in John's case, he would take a reduction from $14.52 to $13.78 to take this option. So it gives up 70 some odd dollars a month. Let's say John kicks the bucket 5 years into it. Jane would get that same money for 15 more years. John drew 5, she draws for the remainder of time, 20 guaranteed. Now on the flip of that, let's say John lives happily ever after. Once John had received that 20th year of payments, at that point, Jane's out of luck once John goes, because the 20 years has been fulfilled and paid to John. Everybody with me so far? So these options are also, I know that I'm throwing a whole lot at you guys, but remember I just said you can only designate one person as your beneficiary? These are the only options that there would be a third party potentially paid out. So here's a horrible worst case example. let's say John chooses life with 20, 10 years into it, John dies, 5 years later, Jane dies. They've only been paid 15 of the 20. So in that scenario, Jane's estate would get a lump sum for those remaining 5 years, okay? With anything else, you wouldn't, with any of the other option choices, you wouldn't see that happen. Once John and Jane both were gone, the money would stop, okay? The survivorships, including the pop-up, provide that a lifetime payment to the beneficiary upon the member's death. They all four do that. The difference is basically the amount of money that you're going to leave behind. So you have an option to do a survivorship option, 100%, where all of John's payment goes to Jane upon John's death. She gets that for her life. John could do a 66 2/3%, where his money comes up just a little bit from that 100%, because when John dies, he's only leaving 2/3 of his payment to Jane for the rest of her life. And then there's the 50% option, where Jane would receive half of John's money upon John's death. Now, with any of those three options, if Jane were to pass before John, John just continues getting his check, and he would get that check for the rest of his lifetime. But again, he doesn't get to rename, so it's not going to go to anyone else. When we get to the pop-up option, what the pop-up option does for John is it says, if John dies first, Jane gets 100%. So if John dies before Jane, or before the beneficiary, it works just like Survivor 100. She gets his money, all of it the money, and she gets it for life. But what the pop-up also says is that if Jane were to pass before John, since they're married, if they were to divorce, then John would actually pop up to the basic payment amount. So if he took pop-up, takes the biggest hit on his money coming down from that basic option, but basically what he buys himself is a lifetime payment for the beneficiary, but if something happens to the beneficiary, he goes to the higher amount from that point for the rest of his life, okay? Usually what you guys are gonna see if you're honing in, I was in a situation, or I am in a situation, where I have to do a survivorship, just because of what we're planning to do. The difference for me between the Survivor 100% amount and my pop-up amount is less than $5. So, the decision was to work $5 a month for the rest of my life to choose that pop-up to kind of both things from happening. We're still debating it. My husband, to me, I'm like, yes. My husband's like, it's $5. So you spend that on a beer, but so anyway, but it's one of those things. It's interesting, with us it was when he finally decided to pay attention to these, and we had that discussion, and he just kind of yelled up from the couch one day, wait, tell me what happens if you die. So we kind of went through all these. Now,
I'm sorry.
No.
I know I've asked a lot of questions. So with the life with 10, 15, 20, you can name either anybody you want to be your beneficiary. Is that the same case every survivor?
yes. Any of these, you are not limited to who you name. There's no relationship requirement. You can name anyone. But and that's a great question. So John has named Jane his spouse, and she's closer in age to him. If John, say, were to run these numbers with his, let's say, oldest child listed or his grandchild listed, he would see his dollar amounts go down because of that person's longer life expectancy. But he still could do that. He would just see his numbers reduced under the survivorships.
Can you name an estate?
You can, but if you name an estate or a trust, you're only given the top 4 options. You don't get a survivorship choice. Okay? The other piece, when naming potentially a child or a grandchild, again, the IRS gets involved here. They have a rule, if you name somebody other than a spouse, there's an age variance formula that we have to apply to both the member and the beneficiary's ages. And so often in a child designation, and definitely with like a grandchild, usually Survivor 100% and pop-up disappear as a choice. Sometimes the 2/3 does too. So sometimes when you name someone younger, you lose some of your options as well. Survivor 50 is generally still available. So one of the things that folks can do with the online calculators, you can run your numbers with different beneficiaries. If you wanted to see what it looks like with your child, all 3 of your kids, your grandkids, whatever, you can run those scenarios in whatever way you want, and you're not making any permanent changes, you're just running your numbers. Yeah.
What if your estate says, though, that the kids don't get it until they're 25? Is that?
We would have to settle out and pay, we would have to pay it. If there was a benefit, it would depend on whether there would be a benefit left to be paid. And that would only, be if you took life at 10, 15, or 20 and passed within that time frame. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a benefit to be paid anyway. Is that, so, but yeah, we wouldn't be able to hold that. We'd have to settle out the estate. I don't think the courts would allow that. I think you'd have to put it in some kind of a holding account for those folks, and then they could access it then. But you'd have to provide some kind of vehicle for the money to go to until they qualified. But, that would be, your own legal instruments dictating that. We would have to generate it somewhere if there was something to be paid out. Anybody else?
There are no pros or cons on basic option or the others, right?
Again, it's to each his own. My husband's planning on leaving his job, so that's why, he's in private, so, he wouldn't be eligible for anything until he's 59 and a half. So he would be extremely dependent on my check. If something happened to me, that's why I'm kind of forced into one. Some folks, basic's a great idea. I talked to a lady the other day. She's had a huge life insurance policy in place and is going to continue to have that in place. So she's just going to use that for survivorship money, and she's going to max out and take her basic. So it really is an individual choice based on your situation. The other piece or consideration for me, while it's extremely expensive to cover my husband on the retirement insurance, we're going to probably have to do that. And so again, if I were in a situation, if something happened to me and he wasn't continuing to get that benefit, he wouldn't be eligible to do the health insurance through the retirement system as well. With Affordable Care Act, that's not as big of an issue as it once was, because you can get insurance in other places now. But that's part of it too. You have to be getting a check to qualify for the retirement insurance, and that's true for the member or the beneficiary. So again, it's depending on, it's what's good for you and yours is really how these play out. So it just kind of depends. Statistically, guys, most people take the basic. When you look at the numbers, people take the basic. And I just think that a lot of that are the folks who don't, they just look at the numbers and they just check the highest box, and, they don't do a lot of analysis as far as what fits. So, that's one of the things that you really need to do is go through and kind of what if with each of the options to kind of determine what's going to work out for you guys the best. There are 2 additional options. Boy, time flies. They're called the Social Security adjustment options. These are only going to be available to you if you are retiring before 62. These work with what your Social Security benefit would be at 62. Now, there's no exchange of money. What happens is you tell us what your Social Security benefit is projected to be at age 62, and we factor that into our formula. So what happens for the member, and in John's situation here, you need to understand that he's 57 years old when he retires. So the way the option works is you receive a higher amount of money, an increased check, from the time you retire until you turn 62. But at 62, we reduce your retirement payment based upon that Social Security amount. So John, being 57, his basic was $14.52. If he chose the survivorship option without survivor rights, we compare that to the basic, it works the same way, there's no survivor benefit. Instead of $14.52, he'd get $21.45 a month for 5 years until he turned 62. But at 62, we drop him down $1,000 because that's the amount of his Social Security benefit at 62. So we use that Social Security amount to determine how much extra John gets from the time he retires until 62, but then at 62, he's reduced by the full Social Security amount. He's getting about $700 extra a month for those 5 years. When I run my numbers for this option, I'm only getting about $250 extra a month because I'm so much farther from age 62, okay? So for me, I personally think I wouldn't touch that option with the 10-foot pole because I'm not gonna take an extra $250 a month for 14 years to then have my pension benefit slashed when I'm 62. Because what if I don't get any Social Security money when I'm 62? That kind of terrifies me. I think there will be something, but right now it's a 30% hit. So again, it's just not an option that appeals to me. Saying some people are, why would you leave money on the table? It kind of depends on your approach. But the options are out there, they exist. You can run these online, just like all the other options. There's a field that asks you what's your social security at 62. You pop that number in, these two options will show when you look at your different retirement payment options. So there's just two with respect to the beneficiary. Without, which is like the basic, there's no survivor benefit once the member passes. And then with, which is like the survivor 100%, it's a full survivor payment if the member passes, okay?
I have a question.
Yes.
I don't know if I understand this right. So does it look at your social security even after you're 62 to reduce your amount?
No, in John's case, he told us he was gonna get a brand new social security at 62.
Okay,
So-
it's for anybody that wants to retire before they're 62.
Right, it's only available for those folks.
Your amount is not reduced any after 62.
If you, your benefits with us are not impacted by Social Security. This is just an additional option choice strictly. It's only available if you're under the age of 62 because of the way it's designed. It gives you more money from that retirement point until you turn 62. But then basically at 62, ultimately what's happening, guys, is we're getting that extra money back because we've dropped your payment down. And so over time, if you live long enough and have chosen this option, you will realize a loss of total money over your retirement life expectancy. And usually that break point is about 7 to 10 years after 62. So in other words, if you make it age 70, from 70 on, you're probably losing money at that point on. Because when you look at these options, which are always going to be the same, you bring Social Security on top of that, then over the long haul, you're going to pull in more money. Now, if you are going to die before 72, maybe this is a good option. So if you know, you can plan accordingly. That's a problem. Most of us do not know. My philosophy is I'm going to live forever. And so I, want that, and I know I'm going to have to work part-time and supplement my income a bit now. I know that. But, later in life, I may not want to work as much, and I hopefully will have that Social Security money to rely on at that point. So, again, it kind of depends on your approach. So, federally, you guys are going to pay taxes. You've not paid taxes on the money. You've not paid federal taxes. So that Uncle Sam's going to want his cut once you start receiving your check. You can ballpark about 10 to 15% of your check for federal taxes if you do based on a withholding based on the tax charts. So a single tax is going to be around 15% of your amount. A married tax withholding rate is going to be around 10%. You can also fix it and have X, $200 come off or whatever, so you can set the amount. You can elect to have 0 taxes withheld, and you and Uncle Sam can work that out at tax time. But you will be asked to complete a tax form and direct the retirement system how to withhold or not for your federal taxes. And that is something that you guys can change at any point once you're retired. And in fact, you'll have a retiree online account when you are retired, and you can just very easily go on there and change your tax withholding, as well as your address and your direct deposit and all that good stuff. Kentucky state income tax, we all have an exclusion of $41,110 in pension income. This is going to include CERS, but it's also going to include if you're drawing from 401ks or 457s or IRAs. So collectively, from all retirement income sources, we have an exclusion of 41. If we're pulling in more than 41, we may owe state income taxes on anything that exceeds that. Now, this number is not locked. The legislature could very easily change that exclusion amount. In fact, there's been legislation pre-filed the last several sessions to do that. One piece last time brought that number down to 25 grand. So this is something you guys want to, kind of watch and, exercise your right to contact your legislators and support or say you're not in favor. What I generally say to people at this point is, we do have this exclusion. Most of our folks don't exceed that as far as just their CERS pension, don't go above 41. But the other part of this is that a few years ago, the legislature also stopped providing cost of living raises for retirees. They put into place that COLAs wouldn't be paid unless the system was 100% funded. Now, you guys in CERS may have a better chance of getting a COLA than those of us in KERS, but at the same time, to get to 100% is gonna take a lot of years if we ever get there again, even in your plan. So, right now you have at least a tax exclusion where hopefully you're not having to pay state income taxes on it, because you're not getting a COLA. So, if they were to tax you heavier on it, it's gonna hit the pension a little bit harder too, which personally I think is extremely unfair. But, when they're looking for revenue, they're looking for revenue. So divorces are subject, or pension is subject to, you may, if you go through a divorce situation, a pension is considered marital property. So if you have a QDRO, which awards an ex-spouse a portion of your benefit, we will enforce that. So upon your retirement, if the courts have awarded a certain portion of your pension to an ex-spouse, we will pay you your portion and we will pay that ex-spouse their portion. Often, most of the time you see QDROs come through as 50% of the married service. So for it to affect your pension, it does require that all of our appropriate paperwork be processed and on file with us. You guys have a $5,000 death benefit with this plan. Once you're retired, that's a one-time $5,000. So whether you have plans in KC or it's just a one-time. Same beneficiary designations, person, trust, or estate. This one you can additionally name a funeral home. And this one can be changed. So if you say you did name your spouse and that person passed on, you could actually change the death benefit designation to someone else. Health insurance benefits. And we've already talked about when this changed. It was July of 2003. So for those of you who did start prior to that date, you are still under what we refer to as our percent-based health benefits. So that means depending on your years of service, we will pay a portion, potentially 100% of your health insurance costs, the plan costs, not the out-of-pocket cost, co-pays and that stuff, but the actual plan premium cost. So 20 years gets you 100% of that contribution, 15 gets you 3/4, 10 years gets you half, and 4 years gets you 25%. There's not a proration in between those different levels. So, 19 years is still only gonna get you 3/4. You gotta have 240 months to get 100%, okay? Let me talk about tier 2 and tier 1, let me talk about dollar base. Those of you who are still tier 1 but started after 2003, the new law said you have to have 10 years of service to qualify for the health benefit. Tier 2s, you have to have 15 years to qualify for the health benefit. And that's the same for tier 3s as well. It's a dollar-based benefit. So what happens is there's a set dollar amount and that is multiplied by your years of service. And that is the full amount that gets paid toward the insurance premium. So when the benefit started in 2003, that dollar amount was $10. So if I had 30 years of service, say, $10 times 30 years gets me $300 a month that's paid toward my plan cost. The plan cost, guys, right now average between $650 and $721 a month for non-Medicare insurance. Though if you only have $300, $400 coming in to offset that, that means you are going to be out of pocket a few $100 for your health insurance plan itself, in addition to, of course, your co-pays and all of that. So it's just something you need to be very aware of, that you may have some higher plan costs based on how this is set up. Now the $10 has gotten a 1.5% adjustment every year since. So it was $12.80. Actually, just this past July 1st, it got another 1.5. So I think that added like 19 cents to it. So it's $12.99 now. So right now, if somebody retired, it would be years of service multiplied by $12.99, and that's the amount that would be paid toward their plan costs. Again, if you're a 100% person, it's going to be the full amount. When folks turn 65, Medicare kicks in as their primary insurance. The Medicare eligible plans are not as costly. You have the same either percent paid toward your plan cost or dollar amount paid toward your plan cost when you turn 65, okay? But just to give you an idea on cost, currently, Our highest cost Medicare plan is $244, and that has a full prescription drug component with that plan. So those of you who are under the dollar benefit, you will have a little bit of relief once you're 65 because those plan costs through the retirement system go down substantially. But that's because Medicare is your primary then, and that's why we pay our Medicare taxes our whole career, so that Medicare kicks in when we are 65 and eligible for that. So everybody has that transition at 65. And we'll send something to you in advance of your 65th birthday to tell you, you need to go sign up for Medicare A and B, and then we'll switch you over to a Medicare eligible plan through us. And if you're already 65 when you retire, we'll want you to go ahead and get your A and B effective, and we'll set you up with the Medicare plan when you do retire. Okay?
If you choose not to get the health insurance through you all right away,
So you can also waive coverage. There's no benefit to waiving. You're just saying, I don't need it. I have other coverage. You can always pick it back up during open enrollment or if there's a qualifying event, just like now. So, if you're covered through, say, your spouse's plan and he retires, so if you lose coverage, that's a qualifier. You can go ahead and pick it back up through us, something like that. So, yeah, otherwise, always open enrollment, you can pick it back up. Now, if you are somebody who is planning to waive when you retire, you do have to actually waive. Fill the form out and check waive, otherwise they default you to the lowest cost plan. So that's just something to keep in mind. You do have to make that initial waiver when you do retire. So, but all the paperwork tells you to do that.
So you're on Medicare, this is not like a supplemental plan to Medicare?
Once you're 65, yes, that's basically what it is. It's a supplemental plan to Medicare, yes.
Oh.
But it does include prescriptions, yes. That's exactly what it is.
Okay.
Mhm.
What is the cost for the spouse's coverage?
It's a lot. Right now, plan costs are just, and I'm dealing with this, that's why I know, it's, so there's a PPO plan available right now, and there's also something called a CDHP plan available. The plan cost for the PPO, the single plan cost is $721. So that's gonna be fully covered for me because I have my 20 years in. But the couple cost is $1,564. So we back $1,564 less the single $721 that's already paid for me. It leaves $848 a month to cover my spouse under the PPO. If I drop to the CDHP, it's $600 a month, so we're probably gonna do the CDHP. But I'm looking at $600 that's coming off my check just to cover him on the insurance. So it is significant. If you were doing family coverage, guys, so including any number of kids, tack another $200 to $300 onto that. But if you're just doing Parent Plus, it's not quite as severe. It would be probably about $300 over what the single plan costs are. The insurance information, guys, we maintain all the insurance information on just the main CareUs website. So if you're logged in to your online accounts, that's just strictly going to be your information. All the health insurance info is on the main site, and we break that down, non-Medicare plans and then the Medicare eligible plan information. So you can easily go to both, whatever section applies and look at the plan costs, get a hold of the booklets and all of that. But it's huge. It used to not be, up until 2013, there was a bit of a subsidy that the legislature had been paying toward the cost of spouse independent coverage through the system. That law sunsetted at the end of 2012. So when 2013 rolled around, we had actually the true cost for the additional family and couple and Parent Plus plans, and it jacked up everybody's, in the neighborhood of to $300 to $800 a month when that sunset provision ended and that subsidy stopped. So, the way the retirement system laws are set up, unless you're a hazardous duty employee, the retirement system is not allowed to pay toward anybody's coverage other than the actual member. So it was a big hit at that time for folks. So we had some very upset retirees with good reason. So
Is there an option to get that money and not
no.
that plan?
Yeah, well, yes. The only way that happens is if you reside somewhere in the country where you are more than 6 months, or excuse me, where you are more than 30 miles away from a network provider. There are 6 people who are eligible for the reimbursement. And what has to happen is you have to have credible coverage insurance. You have to show us a certificate of coverage. You have to do an affidavit based on where you live that basically shows that you're outside the 30-mile range of a provider. And then, yes, there is a reimbursement option where you're paid the benefit you would have been entitled to in lieu of choosing a plan through the system. But again, out of over 100,000 people, we have 6 people who qualify for that right now. So it's not very widespread. So now, could that change in the future? Sure. But that's how it's set up right now. So otherwise, there's no benefit for waiving, and then the reimbursement option is pretty limited. Yeah.
If you move to other country, then you still get the health insurance.
I'm gonna go with you would, but you'd be at a network, so I don't know that it would provide. So kind of have to cross that bridge. Yeah, I don't think it would do much good for you. And you know, just like it is, I'm sure you guys, it's the same way for your plans now. You've got in-network amount and out-of-network, so you'd have the out-of-network. But I think there's also limitations out of the country too, not just in-network, and I'm not as familiar with that. So you want to talk to our health insurance people? Yeah.
Going back to the state taxes that are excluded,
Mhm.
if your spouse
Mhm.
also will.
You each have 41 grand.
Each have 41 grand. And then would you just quickly go over like the hazardous, you talked about the insurance with the
Mhm.
hazardous, they allow?
Hazardous duty members qualify for, if they have 20 years hazardous, it's 100% for full family coverage.
You might have just changed my life.
Because you're covered under his,
I
yeah.
did not know that.
Get nice more valuable.
Don't you force him.
I'm gonna cook a dinner for him tonight.
Now, did he start before July of '03 though?
Before July.
July of '03?
Oh, we're good.
He did, yeah. Okay.
We're good.
Okay, so when you guys are ready to file, Form 6000 does the whole thing. This guy has almost all your paperwork within it. So you do most everything through this one form. What follows is going to be the payment option form, which is the Form 6010, and your insurance information. So it's pretty anticlimactic when you get to that point, because it's just a little bit of paperwork and boom, you're done. And I have literally had multiple people say, is that all? Is that all? I'm like, yep. So it is that simple. You get your first check, assuming everything's back to us on time, you get your first check on the 14th of the month. Now, health insurance is going to kick in with your retirement date. So if I was retiring September 1, my health insurance would be effective September 1. I'd get my first check September 14th, assuming all my paperwork was into the system on time. And so then it's the 14th from that point on out. Everybody goes through an audit a few months after retirement because we're working with projected salaries to determine salary averages. So once everything's posted and in the books, we'll go through and do an audit, and if that results in more than a $2 variance, we'll adjust your check up or down. I'll leave you with the rules currently for work after retirement. There are 2 restrictions if you are going back to work for a participating employer. These rules only apply if you are going back to work for a participating employer. Now, a participating employer would be somebody, anybody in the system. And that's not just CERS, that's anybody in the retirement system. So it's going to cover all of state government. It's going to cover all of CERS. It's pretty much every public sector, agency out there. You have to have a 3-month break between your retirement date and your reemployment date, 3 months. You also are not allowed to have a prearranged employment arrangement with that future employer before you've retired. So again, if I was going to retire September 1st, which is looking possible based on the governor's latest executive order, I could actually seek employment beginning September 2nd with a participating employer, but I could not go to work for them. I'd have to wait September, October, November. I could not go back to work for them until at least December 1st, okay? So the prearranged agreement is prior to termination, prior to retirement, and then the 3-month break is from retirement date 3 months out. Retirement always is effective day 1 of the month. So we're always talking, you know, January 1, February 1, August 1, September 1, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, okay? And that is pretty much,
But you can go into the same position, you don't have to be, you know, if you went from the city to the county or from here to the city.
now it doesn't matter. It's just a 3-month break and no prearranged agreement.
Okay.
Used to, if it was different employment, there were different rules. If it was a different position, there were different rules. That none of that matters anymore. It's if they're in the system, you got to take a 3-month break, and you can't have a prearranged employment arrangement with them. Now, you're not going to be eligible to pay back in as a new employee, so you don't get to earn a second retirement account. But if you're full time, they do have to pay contributions on your salary. So they have a liability to hire back retirees full-time because they have to pay the contributions. There's also potentially an insurance reimbursement if you stay on our insurance. Depending on when you retired and started, sometimes you have to choose your employer's new insurance. We're going to kick you off ours until you come back, but it depends on your specific situation. But if you do come back full-time and you stay on ours, we're going to ding the employer for the cost of the insurance. In addition, they have to pay those contributions, yeah.
Is that full-time or part-time?
It's only a participating position. So if it's part-time, that's not participating. If it's seasonal, it's not participating. If it's temporary, it's not participating. So that's only true in full-time situations where you would otherwise contribute if you're not already retired.
So if it's part-time position, you have to wait for 3 months?
You did. All employment, whether it's non-participating or participating, 3-month break. Yeah. So it's kind of gotten a little more cut and dried. Used to, there were all these ifs, ands, and buts that were part of the mix. Now it's 3-month break, no prearranged agreement. So it's pretty cut and dry now.
That's only if it's participating.
I'm sorry, only if it's a participating employer. If you're going to work for Macy's, no problem. Going to work for Kroger, no problem. But if it's somebody in the system. Guys, here's the deal. We have a lot of agencies who have been outsourcing pieces and parts of their labor force. So health departments have been a good example. Lexington Health Department outsourced like 200 employees to a private company. There are lawsuits every which way because, you know, there's still a tie. There's still technically control employer-employee relationships there. They're not truly private, they're not truly public anymore either. So there's a lot of gray area, and that's being tested in the court system right now. So you don't want to jeopardize the pension, you know, so the best thing for folks to do is hopefully, you know, just observe the break. But there are people, you know, you get a job offer, it's, you know, they're not gonna wait up for you for 3 months. There are those gray areas where folks have gotten into trouble. So you just want to be really careful. So what our legal folks tell you to do is just write us in or email. It just does have to be in writing. They won't respond verbally. You know, I'm planning to, or you know, I'm potentially going to work for X. You know, and they'll give you a written opinion. Well, you need to wait 3 months and don't have a prearranged agreement, or they're going to say they're private and you're good to go. But they very much encourage written opinions for any reemployment. And they actually, the agency, if you talk to somebody at the agency, they're going to say, get a written opinion no matter what you're going back to do. You know, obviously if it's completely private, you're not going to have issues, but that's what they're going to tell you at the office, because we void somebody every single month. Somebody violates one of those 2 rules every month, we stop their retirement. They have to pay us back everything we've paid them. That includes their insurance benefits. Because based on the IRS rules, if they violate one of those 2 things, they didn't have a bona fide termination. They were never eligible for that money and those benefits. Therefore, they got to give them all back to us. And that's the biggest piece, is you don't want to jeopardize that. But they void somebody every single month for breaking one of those rules. We eventually find out about it, and they stop it, and they have to pay us all back. So you just don't want to mess that up once you've, done 27 years or however many years and earn that benefit. You don't want to jeopardize that benefit. So you want to be really careful about what you're potentially going back to work to do. So it's crazy to me. I can't imagine how people mess that up, but they said yes every month, and I was dumbfounded by that. We have 2 people who owe over $250,000 because we found out way after the fact, and they had been drawing and getting those health benefits for a long, long time before we found out. So those are worst case scenarios, clearly. But, basically when they ever actually terminate again and go to draw those benefits, they're going to be drastically reduced till, they pay us back what they owe us. So, tough stuff.
But Walmart Greeter is safe.
I would assume, yes. Walmart has 0 affiliation with KRS, yeah, for the most part. Unless that changes somewhere.
You're
Yeah.
fries with that.
Yeah, so, and also my legal people would, I'd get in trouble if I didn't throw this notice up. So anything I told you will not trump state or federal law, so don't take anything out of context. But anyway, I know I'm meeting with some of you guys later today, one-on-one. I was hoping to show you guys a quick demo, but I talked too long, sorry about that. Go out online and check that out. It's real easy to use, even if you're far from retirement. Go in and make sure your beneficiaries are up to date. That's always important. And check your start dates. Check your service credit history. Make sure all that's the way it should be. We've only had this new system in since 2010. And so while most agencies were pretty good at their reporting, I do stumble across accounts every now and again where we have little holes. They may be missing a month or 2 of service, and usually that's going to be a situation that was before 2010. And there are all kinds of reasons why, that might happen. But it's always, the sooner you would find something, the sooner it can get resolved. Again, going back to record keeping, I had a guy just last year in Louisville. He was missing like 8 years of service. And it turned out that it had just been reported under a different social security number. Now, we caught most of that. We had a lot of situations where that was the case. When we did our data cleanup before we converted to our new system, we caught most of that. But he was one, the social was off enough that we didn't marry him back up. But that's all it was. It was a matter of, once we realized that the service wasn't there, they found the service under a different social security number with his name attached to it, so we were able to merge it back together. But there are all kinds of crazy things, and so it's just important, I think, since years of service is such a big determiner of your benefits. You want to make sure that that's whole and that you have everything you're supposed to have. Same thing as I had a lady. She knew she went on maternity leave, but she just kind of, I guess, forgot she wasn't working for several weeks, and she was missing a couple months of service in 2 different years because of her unpaid maternity leave. So, it's again, in your head, I know you don't forget about your children, but you may think, you didn't miss, months of service, and, you may be off 2 or 3 months as far as your service credit goes. So you're thinking you got your 27 and you've only got, 26 years and 9 months. So you just want to check all that and make sure it is the way it should be. So, and then if you are, then everybody can run their numbers if they want. So for some of you that may be sooner and more happy than some of you who are like, oh my God, it's 30 years from now. So it just depends on where you are. Thanks, God. Anybody have any more questions? Okay.
Thank you.
Good job.